Winter, 1875. In the bitter cold of the American frontier, Sarah Mitchell stumbles through knee-deep snow, her pregnant form bent against the howling wind. Cast out by her settlement for carrying an unmarried woman's shame, she faces certain death in the merciless wilderness. But fate has other plans. When Noble Hawk, a respected Comanche leader, discovers her nearly frozen body at the edge of his hunting grounds, he makes a decision that will forever alter both their destinies. Despite the objections of his people and the threat of settler violence, he brings her into his winter camp, offering sanctuary when no one else would. As Sarah's time draws near, their unexpected connection deepens into something neither dared to imagine possible. But can love truly bridge the chasm between their worlds? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, Sarah Mitchell sat in her family's modest cabin on the outskirts of Fort Blessing, fingers tracing the worn leather binding of her grandmother's Bible. Pressed flowers, prairie roses and Indian paintbrush marked passages that had guided generations of Mitchell women through their darkest hours. The morning light filtered through salt-rubbed windows, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn floor as Sarah opened the book to Psalms, her grandmother's spidery handwriting in the margins offering comfort she desperately needed. "Sarah?" Her mother's voice, tinged with worry, carried from the kitchen. "The water's ready for your morning sickness tea." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach, hidden beneath the folds of her cotton dress. Only she knew the truth, for now, but soon her secret would become impossible to conceal, and everything would change. "Coming, Mother." She closed the Bible, tucking a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. The worn floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she made her way to the kitchen, where her mother, Elizabeth, stood stirring herbs into a steaming cup. Elizabeth's eyes, the same deep brown as Sarah's own, studied her daughter's face. "You're pale again this morning." She pressed the back of her hand to Sarah's forehead. "No fever, thank the Lord, but you've been sickly for weeks now." Sarah accepted the cup with trembling hands, the pungent aroma of ginger and mint rising. With the steam, her mother's concern was a double-edged sword, both comforting and terrifying. Elizabeth Mitchell had raised 5 children in this frontier town. She would recognize the signs soon enough. "Mother," Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something." But before she could continue, a sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Pastor William's commanding voice carried through the wooden planks. "Elizabeth? Sarah? A word, if you please." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. Pastor William had been a pillar of their community since its founding, but lately his sermons had grown harsh, focused on sin and punishment rather than mercy. Just last Sunday, he had condemned Mary Watson, a young widow who had taken work at the saloon, calling her a Jezebel before the entire congregation. Elizabeth smoothed her apron and moved to answer the door. "Sarah, get another cup for the pastor." "No need, Elizabeth," Pastor William said as he stepped inside, his tall frame filling the doorway. His dark eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "I've come about a matter of grave concern. There are rumors circulating about your daughter." Sarah's fingers tightened around her cup. How could he know? She hadn't told a soul, not even, "I've heard whispers about meetings with that Peterson boy out by the creek." The pastor's voice dripped with accusation. Unchaperoned meetings. Thomas Peterson. The name alone brought a flush to Sarah's cheeks. He had promised to marry her, had sworn his love beneath the summer stars. But 3 weeks ago, he had left with a wagon train bound for California, taking her heart and more with him. Elizabeth's face hardened. "My Sarah is a good girl, Pastor. She wouldn't—" "Mother," Sarah interrupted, setting down her cup. The time for secrets had passed. Drawing a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and faced them both. "I'm with child." The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth sank into a kitchen chair, her face ashen. Pastor William's expression shifted from shock to something darker, more righteous. "So, the rumors are true." He pulled a small black notebook from his coat pocket. "The sins of the flesh never stay hidden for long. The town council will need to be informed immediately." "The council?" Elizabeth found her voice. "Surely this is a private family matter." "Private?" Pastor William's laugh held no warmth. "Nothing is private when it threatens the moral fabric of our community. We've worked too hard to build a godly settlement here. One bad apple can spoil the entire barrel." Sarah watched as he made notes in his little book, each scratch of his pencil another nail in the coffin of her future. She thought of the pressed flowers in her grandmother's Bible, of all the women who had faced trials before her. None, she suspected, had faced the storm that was about to break over her head. "You understand," Pastor William continued, his voice softening to something almost kind, but with an edge that cut deeper than his previous anger, "that there will need to be consequences. The young people of Fort Blessing must understand that such indiscretions cannot be tolerated." Elizabeth stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "She's my daughter, Pastor. Whatever consequences there are to face, we'll face them as a family." But Sarah could see it in the pastor's eyes. This was bigger than family now. As he turned to leave, he paused in the doorway. "A council meeting will be called for tomorrow evening. I suggest you both pray for guidance before." Then, his gaze lingered on Sarah. "Some sins require more than mere repentance to be washed clean." After he left, Sarah and her mother stood in silence as the morning light continued to pour through the windows, now feeling more harsh than welcoming. Elizabeth finally turned to her daughter, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Oh, my girl," she whispered, pulling Sarah into her arms. "My precious, foolish girl, what are we going to do?" Sarah buried her face in her mother's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of lye soap and dried lavender. She thought of Thomas, somewhere on the trail to California, unaware of the life growing inside her. She thought of her grandmother's Bible, of all the passages marked with flowers and faith. "We'll pray," Sarah said finally, though she wasn't sure even prayer would be enough this time. "We'll pray, and then we'll face whatever comes." That night, as Sarah lay in her narrow bed listening to her parents' hushed, urgent voices from the kitchen below, she pulled out her grandmother's Bible once more. A pressed prairie rose fell into her lap as she opened to Psalms, her grandmother's favorite passage marked with fading ink. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes, knowing that tomorrow she would need every ounce of strength these ancient words could provide. Dawn painted the snow-covered hills in shades of lavender and gold as Noble Hawk emerged from his lodge, an eagle feather, symbol of his leadership, secured in his long black hair. The winter camp lay nestled in a protected valley, 20 lodges arranged in a circular pattern that had served their people for generations. Smoke from morning fires rose straight into the still air, carrying the scent of burning cedar. He paused to study the sky, reading the signs his father had taught him since childhood. More snow would come before nightfall. The winter had already proven harsh, forcing them to move their camp 3 times in search of better hunting grounds. The buffalo herds were growing scarce, pushed further south by the increasing presence of white settlers. "Brother," morning, Star's voice drew his attention. His sister approached, her face grave beneath her wool trade blanket. "The council fire needs to be lit. There is much to discuss." Noble Hawk nodded, noting the worry lines around her eyes. At 35, Morning Star had served as the tribe's medicine woman for over a decade, following in their grandmother's footsteps. Her wisdom was as valued as any warrior's. "Spotted Wolf's hunters returned before dawn," she continued, falling into step beside him. "They found fresh cavalry tracks to the north. The Bluecoats are moving their patrols closer." "They always do," Noble Hawk replied, his voice deep and measured, like wolves circling during winter's hunger. He touched the eagle feather in his hair, a gesture that had become habit in times of trouble. The feather had been his father's last gift before dying in a battle with Texas Rangers 10 years ago. Its presence reminded him of both his responsibilities and his father's final words. Lead with wisdom, not anger. They reached the council fire pit, where several elder warriors already waited. Spotted Wolf, his weathered face marked with old battle scars, stood to make his report. The tracks were fresh, less than 2 days old. 3 groups of riders moving in a pattern. They're searching for something, or someone. Noble Hawk considered this as he worked to light the fire. The flames caught quickly in the dry cedar wood, sending sparks dancing into the morning air. Or they're mapping our winter camps for when the weather breaks. There's more, Morningstar added, her voice low. Our food stores are lower than I'd like. The children need fresh meat. And the pregnant women. She left the thought unfinished, but Noble Hawk understood. Winter pregnancies were always dangerous, and they had 3 women near their time. Rising from the fire, Noble Hawk surveyed his people's camp. Despite the hardships, there was strength here. Children played between the lodges, their laughter carrying on the crisp air. Women worked at their morning tasks, smoke-tanning hides and preparing the day's meals. Warriors maintained their weapons and told stories to the young ones, passing down the old ways. But change was coming, as inevitable as the winter snows. Noble Hawk had seen enough in his 40 winters to know that the old ways alone might not be enough to ensure their survival. Some bands had already chosen to surrender to the reservations, trading freedom for government rations and false promises. Others fought to the death, preferring to die as warriors than live as prisoners. His own path, seeking to adapt while preserving their essential ways, was like walking the edge of a knife. We must send hunters south, he decided finally. Small groups moving quietly. 2 days' ride should take them beyond the soldiers' patrol routes. Spotted Wolf nodded approval, but Morningstar wasn't finished. And what of White Bear's proposal? The question hung heavy in the air. White Bear, a leader from a neighboring band, had suggested joining forces, combining their strength for better protection against both the soldiers and the harsh winter. But Noble Hawk knew such an arrangement would bring its own complications. A larger camp is harder to hide, he said carefully, and harder to feed, but easier to defend, Spotted Wolf countered, and White Bear's band has access to better hunting grounds. Noble Hawk was about to respond when a young warrior running deer rushed to the council fire. Riders approaching from the east, blue coats. The camp erupted into controlled activity. Warriors moved to defensive positions while women quickly gathered children into the lodges. Noble Hawk grabbed his rifle, a modern weapon he'd learned to use as well as any bow, and followed running deer to the eastern ridge. Through his brass spyglass, another trade item that had proven its worth, he counted 6 cavalry scouts. They weren't charging in for an attack. Instead, they moved slowly, methodically searching the landscape. One carried what appeared to be a civilian's coat. They're tracking someone, Noble Hawk murmured, lowering the spyglass. Not us. Not this time. Morningstar had followed them to the ridge. The spirits are restless today, she said softly. Change rides the wind. Noble Hawk felt it too, a stirring in the air that spoke of more than just the coming snow. His father had taught him to trust such feelings, to listen to the wisdom that came from beyond the visible world. Keep watch, he instructed, running. Dear, if they turn this way, light the signal fire. I'll lead them away from the camp. He turned to his sister. Have the hunters prepare. Once the soldiers pass, they must leave immediately. We need that meat before the next storm. Morningstar caught his arm. And you, brother, what does your heart tell you about this day? Noble Hawk touched the eagle feather once more, feeling its powerful medicine, that the Great Spirit is about to test us all. He looked to the heavy sky, where storm clouds gathered like dark buffalo robes, and that before this winter ends, we will all be changed. As he descended the ridge, the first snowflakes began to fall. In the distance, a lone wolf's howl echoed across the valley, a sound that could have been either warning or welcome. Noble Hawk had lived long enough to know that sometimes they were one and the same. The town hall's wooden walls seemed to close in around Sarah as she clutched her leather journal to her chest. She had begun writing in it the day after Pastor William's visit, recording her fears, her prayers, and her growing sense of isolation. Now, 3 weeks later, she sat beside her mother on the hard wooden bench, facing the town council. The room was packed with familiar faces, neighbors, friends, people she'd known all her life, yet she had never felt more alone. Each disapproving glance, each whispered comment cut deeper than the last. Her father sat on her other side, his calloused hand covering hers, but even his presence couldn't shield her from what was coming. Pastor William stood at the front of the room, his black notebook open before him. "We are gathered here tonight," he began, his voice carrying to every corner, "to address a matter of grave moral concern. Our community was founded on godly principles, built by the sweat and sacrifice of God-fearing people who sought to create a haven of virtue in this wilderness." Sarah felt her mother stiffen beside her. They both knew what was coming, had known since the moment Sarah's condition became impossible to hide. The small bump of her pregnancy was now visible beneath her dress, a source of both love and terror. "Sarah Mitchell," Pastor William continued, fixing her with his stern gaze, "has brought shame upon not only her family, but our entire community. Her condition is evidence of fornication, a sin that threatens the very foundation of our moral society." Sarah's fingers tightened around her journal. Inside were the words she couldn't speak aloud. Her love for Thomas, her dreams of their future together, and later, her desperate letters to California that had gone unanswered. Furthermore, the pastor's voice grew harder. She refuses to name the father of her child, protecting him from righteous judgment and denying her own path to redemption through honest confession. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering Thomas's last words, "Wait for me. I'll send for you once I've found gold." Empty promises that she had clung to until hope became impossible. "The council has deliberated on this matter," Pastor William announced, "and we have reached a decision. In accordance with our settlements, charter and moral law, Sarah Mitchell is to be banished from Fort Blessing." "No!" Elizabeth's cry cut through the shocked silence. "You cannot. She's with child." Precisely why this judgment must be swift and certain. Pastor William's voice remained steady. Her presence here would only encourage others to stray from the righteous path. The punishment must fit the crime. Sarah's father stood, his voice shaking with rage. "This is murder, sending a pregnant woman into the wilderness in winter. You'll have 2 deaths on your conscience. The council has spoken." Pastor William closed his notebook with finality. "She has until sunrise tomorrow to gather her belongings and leave. Any who aid her after that time will face banishment themselves." The room erupted in chaos. Some voices raised in protest, others in support of the verdict. Sarah sat motionless, her mind strangely calm in the midst of the storm. She opened her journal and wrote with trembling hands, "Today I learned that righteousness without mercy is nothing but cruelty wearing a holy mask." That night, as her mother packed a bundle with whatever supplies they could spare, Sarah added, one final entry to her journal by candlelight, "Thomas, wherever you are, I hope you find your gold. I will find my own way, for myself and for our child." Dawn broke grey and threatening, snow already falling in thick flakes. Sarah stood at the edge of town, her father's old coat wrapped around her, a pack of meager supplies on her back. Her mother pressed her Bible into Sarah's hands, with tears streaming down her face. "Head south," her father whispered urgently. "There's another settlement, 3 days' walk. If you can make it, time's up." Pastor William's voice rang out across the snowy street. He stood with several council members, ensuring the sentence was carried out. Sarah hugged her parents one last time, trying to memorize the feel of their arms around her, the smell of her mother's lavender soap. Then, squaring her shoulders, she turned and walked into the swirling snow. The first day, she walked until her legs trembled with exhaustion, the wind cutting through her coat like knives. She made camp in a shallow cave, building a small fire with shaking hands. That night, she read her grandmother's Bible by firelight, until sleep claimed her. The second day brought deeper snow and darker skies. Her food was already half gone, the cold sapping her strength faster than she had expected. The child within her stirred, and she pressed a hand to her belly. "Stay strong, little one," she whispered. "We'll find our way." By the third day she was lost. The landmarks her father had described were buried under snow, and the storm had turned the world into a white void. Her feet were numb, her hands blue with cold despite her mittens. The journal in her pack held what she feared might be her last words. "I don't blame you, Thomas. We were both young, both foolish, but this child, our child, deserves a chance at life. God, if you're listening, help me find a way." When she stumbled and fell for the third time, Sarah knew she couldn't get up again. The snow felt almost warm now, a dangerous sign she recognized from her father's winter survival teachings. As consciousness began to fade, she thought she saw a figure approaching on horseback, dark hair streaming in the wind, an eagle feather, catching what little light remained. Her last thought before darkness took her was that death wore a strangely beautiful face. Sarah floated in and out of consciousness, aware only of warmth and the scent of cedar smoke. Voices spoke in a language she didn't understand, soft and melodious like wind through prairie grass. Something warm and bitter touched her lips. Tea, she thought distantly, and gentle hands helped her drink. When she finally opened her eyes fully, she found herself lying on soft furs inside a large tepee. A fire burned in the center, sending shadows dancing across the leather walls. Beside her sat a woman with long, silver-streaked black hair, sorting through a beautifully beaded medicine bundle. The woman's hands moved with practiced confidence as she selected dried herbs and roots. "You're safe now," the woman said in careful English, noticing Sarah's wakeful state. "I am Morning Star. My brother found you in the snow." Sarah tried to sit up, one hand instinctively going to her stomach. The baby was the baby. "Your child lives," Morning Star assured her, placing a steadying hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Strong spirit, like its mother. Now drink this." She held out a wooden cup filled with steaming liquid. Sarah's hands trembled as she accepted the cup, but Morning Star's presence was oddly comforting. The medicine woman's dark eyes held neither judgment nor pity, only a healer's calm assessment. "My brother, Noble Hawk, he is speaking with the council now?" Morning Star continued, adding something from her medicine bundle to the fire. Sweet, cleansing smoke rose up. "Some say it is dangerous to shelter a white woman. Others remember old prophecies about bridges between peoples." The tea was bitter but warming, spreading heat through Sarah's cold-numbed limbs. As strength returned, so did memory, the banishment, the desperate journey, the certainty of death in the snow. Tears welled up unexpectedly. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "I thought we were going to die out there." Morning Star's hands stilled in their work. "Why were you alone in the snow? In your condition?" Sarah hesitated, shame and anger warring in her heart. But Morning Star's direct gaze demanded truth. "My people, they cast me out because I'm carrying a child and not married." To Sarah's surprise, Morning Star smiled slightly. "White people have strange ways. Among our people, all children are blessings. All life is sacred." She selected a small packet from her medicine bundle, unwrapping it to reveal dried berries. "Eat. Good for mother and child." Outside, voices rose in what sounded like argument. Morning Star frowned, rising to check through the teepee's entrance. "Flap. The council still debates. Rest now. You are under my brother's protection, and I am the medicine woman. None will harm you here." But as the day progressed, Sarah became aware of the tension her presence caused. Children peeked curiously into the teepee, only to be hurried away by worried mothers. Warriors passed by, their expressions guarded. Through it all, Morning Star remained a calm presence, tending to Sarah with herbs and medicines from her bundle, each item carefully chosen and accompanied by soft prayers in her native tongue. "This bundle," Morning Star explained as she worked, "holds the healing wisdom of many generations. My grandmother taught me each medicine's song, each herb's spirit." She held up a piece of dried root. "This one is for strength. This," she touched a small leather pouch, "carries prayers for safe birth. You will need both." Toward evening, Noble Hawk entered the teepee. Sarah's heart quickened at the sight of him, tall, dignified, with an eagle feather in his hair catching the firelight. He spoke briefly with his sister in their language, before turning to Sarah. "The council has agreed you may stay," he said, his English careful but clear, "at least until your child comes. But there are those who fear your presence will bring soldiers to our camp." "I understand," Sarah replied softly. "I don't want to bring trouble to people who have shown me kindness, but I have nowhere else to go." Noble Hawk studied her for a long moment. "Everyone has somewhere to go. The question is finding the right path." He gestured to Morning Star's medicine bundle. "My sister's medicines can heal the body, but the spirit, that must find its own healing." That night, as the camp settled into darkness, Sarah lay awake, listening to the wind outside. Morning Star had left her medicine bundle nearby, its presence somehow reassuring. Each item inside represented generations of knowledge, of healing, of wisdom passed down through careful hands. It was so different from the harsh judgment she had faced in Fort Blessing. She thought of her own grandmother's Bible, still in her pack, and wondered if perhaps there were more ways than one to carry wisdom forward, more ways than one to find grace. In the darkness, the baby moved within her. Sarah placed her hand over the spot, whispering, "We're safe now, little one. We've found shelter with people who understand that life is precious, no matter how it comes into the world." Morning Star's voice came softly from near the fire. "You should sleep. Tomorrow you begin to learn our ways. If you stay until spring, you must know how to live as we live. Will they accept me, your people? Time will tell, but you have strength in you, I see it clearly. And my brother," she paused, "he does not make such decisions lightly. Sleep now. The medicines will watch over your dreams." Sarah closed her eyes, surrounded by the scent of cedar and healing herbs. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she felt something like peace. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight she was warm, her child was safe, and kindness had found her in the wilderness. Outside, a wolf howled, a lonely sound carrying across the snow-covered valley. But within the teepee, wrapped in borrowed furs and watched over by Morning Star's sacred medicines, Sarah felt only gratitude. She had walked through judgment and survived. Perhaps here, among people who valued life over rigid morality, she might find not just survival, but a new way to live. In the flickering light of his teepee's fire, Noble Hawk's knife moved with careful precision across the piece of cedar wood in his hands. Each stroke revealed the form hidden within, a small horse, its neck proud, its legs caught in mid-gallop. He had been working on it for several nights now, after the day's duties were done and the camp had grown quiet. He paused, running his thumb over the smooth curve of the horse's back. His father had taught him this art, explaining that a leader must know how to create, not just how to fight. "In your hands," the old man had said, "wood remembers what it was to be alive." A soft footfall outside his teepee drew his attention. "Enter," he called, recognizing his sister's step. Morning Star ducked inside, snow dusting her shoulders. Her eyes went immediately to the carving in his hands, a gift for the white woman's child. "Sarah," he corrected gently, "she has a name." "Sarah," Morning Star agreed, settling beside the fire. "The council is talking again. Spotted Wolf says the soldiers are still searching. They found tracks near the North Ridge." Noble Hawk set aside his knife, but kept the half-finished horse in his hands. "They always search. This is different. They're looking for her." "Yes, which makes her dangerous to keep here. More dangerous to send away." He turned the carving, studying it in the firelight. "You've seen how she tries to learn our ways. Yesterday she helped the women with the hides. Her hands were raw, but she didn't complain." Morning Star was quiet for a moment, adding cedar to the fire. "I've seen how you watch her." Noble Hawk's hands stilled on the carving. "I watch over everyone in this camp. Not like this." His sister's voice was gentle, but firm. "The women talk. They see how you linger near my teepee when she's learning our medicines, how your eyes follow her when she walks through camp. She carries a child. She needs protection. She carries another man's child." Noble Hawk set the wooden horse aside, carefully. I know this, as I know the complications her presence brings, but when I found her in the snow, he paused, searching for the right words. The Great Spirit put her in my path for a reason. Morning Star studied her brother's face in the firelight. Perhaps, or perhaps the soldiers will follow her trail here, and we will all pay the price for your compassion. After she left, Noble Hawk returned to his carving, but his thoughts remained troubled. He remembered the moment he had first seen Sarah in the snow, her dark hair stark against the white ground, one hand protectively curved over her swollen belly, even in unconsciousness. Something in that gesture had touched him deeply, the instinct to protect life, even at the edge of death. The next morning, he found Sarah by the women's fire, carefully scraping a hide under the instruction of Old Woman Walking, one of the eldest in the camp. Her movements were awkward but determined, and she listened intently to the old woman's guidance. Despite the language barrier, "You learned quickly," he said, approaching them. Sarah looked up, a strand of hair falling across her face. The morning light caught the auburn highlights in it, reminding him of the cedar he had worked the night before. "Your people have been kind to teach me," she replied. "I want to earn my place here." Old Woman Walking said something in Comanche that made Sarah's brow furrow in concentration. Noble Hawk smiled slightly. "She says your hands are strong, but your scraping is still too deep, like a bear digging for roots." Sarah laughed, the first time he had heard the sound, and it changed her face entirely, bringing color to her cheeks. "Tell her I will try to be more like what animal would be better?" "Like an antelope," Old Woman Walking said in heavily accented English, demonstrating the lighter touch with her own scraping tool. Gentle but firm. Noble Hawk found himself lingering, watching as Sarah adjusted her technique. She had been with them for nearly 2 weeks now, and each day brought small improvements in her strength, in her understanding of their ways, in the gradual relaxation of her guard. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, he found her sitting alone outside Morning Star's teepee, writing in a small leather book. She quickly closed it when she saw him approach. "Your thoughts?" he asked, gesturing to the book. Sarah touched its worn cover. "My journal. I've kept it since they told me I had to leave. Sometimes writing helps me understand things better." She paused, then added softly, "Thank you. I never properly thanked you for saving our lives." Noble Hawk reached into his pouch and withdrew the wooden horse, now finished. The firelight caught the smooth lines of its form, making the cedar seem almost alive. "This is for your child," he said, holding it out to her. Sarah took it with careful hands, her fingers tracing the details he had carved, the flowing mane, the powerful legs, the proud arch of neck. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You made this." He nodded, watching her face. "Every child should have something made with care, something that carries stories in its making." "What stories does this one carry?" "Of horses running free on the prairie, of strength and speed and grace." He paused, then added more quietly, "of finding safe paths through dangerous places." Their eyes met over the carving, and something passed between them. Something that made Noble Hawk's heart beat faster, despite his years of practiced control. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly on the wooden horse. The moment was broken by shouts from the edge of camp. Both of them turned to see Running Deer sprinting toward them, his face grave. "Soldiers," he reported breathlessly. "A large party, moving this way. They have dogs with them." Noble Hawk rose quickly, years of leadership taking over. "How far?" 2 hours, maybe less." Sarah clutched the wooden horse to her chest, her face pale. "They're tracking me. I should go, lead them away from your people." "No!" Noble Hawk's voice was firm. "The snow is too deep, the night too close. You would not survive." He turned to Running Deer. "Tell Spotted Wolf to prepare the warriors. We may need to move camp tonight." To Sarah, he added more softly, "You are under my protection now, both of you," as Running Deer rushed off to spread. The warning. Noble Hawk saw Sarah's hand move to her belly, that same protective gesture that had first moved him. The wooden horse was still pressed to her chest like a talisman. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me," she said. Then stay close to Morning Star. Do exactly as she says." He touched the eagle feather in his hair, drawing strength from its presence. "We have survived worse than this. We will survive this too." But as he strode away to organize the camp's defense, Noble Hawk felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He had carved protection into that wooden horse, prayers for safety in every stroke of his knife. Now he could only hope the Great Spirit would honor those prayers for all their sakes. The sound of women's laughter drew Sarah from Morning Star's teepee into the crisp morning air. A month had passed since the soldiers' near discovery of the camp, a month of constant movement and watching. But today, gathered around the women's fire, the atmosphere was lighter as several of the younger women worked on their beadwork while sharing stories. Sarah's feet, wrapped in newly completed moccasins, a gift from Morning Star, moved silently across the packed snow. The soft leather footwear, decorated with intricate blue and white beadwork representing morning stars, had replaced her worn boots that had nearly been her death in the storm. Each step in them reminded her of how far she had come from Fort Blessing. "Come," Morning Star called, patting the hide beside her. "Your fingers are clever with the needle. You should learn our patterns." The other women made space in their circle, their initial wariness of her having gradually softened through shared daily tasks. Young River, barely 16 and already expecting her first child, offered Sarah a smile as she settled down. "See how the beads tell stories?" Morning Star explained, showing Sarah a piece she was working on. "Each color, each pattern has meaning. Blue for sky, white for snow, red for the sacred direction of sunrise." Sarah ran her fingers over her moccasins, tracing the star pattern. "Like these? Yes, I chose that pattern for you. Stars to guide your path." Morning Star's dark eyes held a hint of amusement, "Though perhaps now you guide others too." Sarah felt her cheeks warm, knowing Morning Star referred to her brother. Noble Hawk had taken to bringing her small gifts, herbs for tea, a particularly fine hide for the baby's cradle board she was learning to make, and always new stories about their people's ways. Young River leaned forward, her round belly preceding her. "Tell us about your people's marriage customs," she said in careful English. "Do you really let others choose your husband?" "Not always," Sarah replied, accepting the beading materials. Morning Star handed her. "Sometimes we choose for love." Her throat tightened, remembering Thomas and his empty promises. "Love is good," Old Woman Walking commented from her place of honor near the fire. "But love must be like these moccasins, practical as well as beautiful, must carry you over rough ground, not just look pretty in sunshine." The other women nodded sagely, and Sarah found herself smiling despite her memories. These women had taught her more than just beadwork and hide preparation. They had shown her how to live with dignity regardless of circumstance, how to find strength in community rather than judgment. "Watch now," Morning Star instructed, demonstrating a complex beading pattern. "This design is for protection. All mothers need such medicine." As Sarah worked, letting the rhythm of beading calm her thoughts, she became aware of movement at the edge of their circle. Noble Hawk stood there, watching them, with an expression that made her heart flutter. He carried his rifle and wore his winter hunting gear. "The council is gathered," he announced. "We must discuss the spring movement." Morning Star set aside her beadwork. "Already? The snow has barely begun to melt. The soldiers have established a new fort to the north. We must decide our path before the trail's clear." Sarah felt the mood around the fire shift. The women's faces grew serious, their hands stilling on their work. They all knew what was at stake. Their traditional hunting grounds were shrinking, hemmed in by increasing military presence and settler expansion. Noble Hawk's eyes met Sarah's briefly before he turned away. She understood the weight he carried. The tribe's survival depended on his decisions, and her presence complicated everything. Later that evening, as Sarah sat cross-legged in Morning Star's teepee, working on her beading by firelight, the medicine woman spoke quietly. "Your child will come with the spring thaw. Have you thought about what then?" Sarah's hands stilled on her work. The question had haunted her through the long winter nights. "I can't go back," she said finally, "and I wouldn't want to. Here, I've found—" She touched her moccasins, searching for words. "I've found a different kind of faith. One that values life over judgment." Morning Star added sage to the fire, letting its cleansing smoke fill the teepee. "And my brother, I see how your eyes follow him too." Sarah felt her face flush. "He has shown me great kindness." "Kindness?" Morning Star's voice held a gentle challenge. "Is that all you see in him?" Before Sarah could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Voices raised in alarm, feet running on packed snow. Morning Star rose quickly, pushing aside the tippy flap. Spotted Wolf's voice carried across the camp. "Riders approaching! Many riders!" Sarah's heart clenched. She reached instinctively for the wooden horse Noble Hawk had carved, which she now kept always near her sleeping furs. Its smooth form had become a comfort in moments of fear. "Stay here," Morning Star commanded, but Sarah was already struggling to her feet, one hand supporting her heavy belly. Outside, the camp had erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors moved to defensive positions while women quickly gathered children. Through the gathering dusk, Sarah could see the distant riders, not soldiers this time, but other Comanche. Noble Hawk strode through the camp, his voice carrying clear authority. "It is White Bear's band. They seek shelter with us." Sarah watched as nearly 40 people rode into the camp. Men, women, children, their faces drawn with exhaustion and hunger. She recognized the signs of people driven from their homes, having lived that terror herself. Without thinking, she moved to help, her beaded moccasins carrying her surely through the snow. When an elderly woman stumbled from her horse, Sarah was there to offer support. When a child cried from cold and hunger, she quickly brought warm buffalo robes and dried meat from Morning Star's stores. Later, as the newcomers were settled around fires with food and warm drinks, Sarah found herself beside Noble Hawk at the edge of the camp. "They were driven from their winter grounds," he said quietly. "The soldiers gave them no choice: surrender to the reservation or be considered hostile." Sarah looked down at her moccasins, at the star pattern that had come to mean so much. "And now we are too many to hide easily, but perhaps—" He touched the eagle feather in his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as his way of finding clarity. "Perhaps it is time to stop hiding, to find a different path." She felt the baby move within her, strong and certain. "Sometimes the path finds us," she said softly, thinking of her own journey through the snow to this place. Noble Hawk's hand moved as if to touch her, then dropped back to his side. But his eyes, when they met hers, held a warmth that defied the winter chill. "Yes," he agreed, "sometimes it does." That night, as Sarah lay in her furs listening to the sounds of the enlarged camp settling around her, she ran her fingers over the beadwork of her moccasins. Each bead represented a choice, a step on this unexpected path. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time since leaving Fort Blessing, she felt truly certain of her direction. Running Deer burst into the council teepee, snow melting. From his winter leggings, clutching something metal in his hand, Noble Hawk rose immediately, recognizing the gravity in the young warrior's expression. The other council members fell silent, their discussion about spring movements forgotten. "Found this," Running Deer said, holding out a military scout's badge. "Near the creek where the women gather water. They're closer than we thought." "Noble." Hawk took the badge, its brass surface dulled with age and weather. The eagle insignia was still clear. 7th Cavalry, the same unit that had been searching for Sarah months ago. They hadn't given up. They'd simply grown more patient. "Show me," he commanded, following Running Deer out into the late winter afternoon. The camp had grown significantly since White Bear's people joined them, making it harder to conceal their presence. Smoke from multiple fires rose into the steel-gray sky, and the sound of children playing carried across the snow. At the creek, Running Deer pointed out the signs: boot prints partially obscured by fresh snow, broken branches at rider's height, a dropped cartridge that couldn't be more than 2 days old. Noble Hawk's heart grew heavy. They had remained in this location longer than usual, partly because moving such a large group was difficult, partly because Sarah's time was drawing near. Sarah, the thought of her made him touch the eagle feather in his hair, seeking guidance. These past months had changed everything. He had watched her grow strong among his people, learning their ways with a determination that earned respect even from the most skeptical. The wooden horse he had carved now sat proudly among her few possessions, joined by beadwork she had learned to craft herself. "There's more," Running Deer said quietly. "White Bear's scouts report a new fort being built to the south. They're surrounding us, closing the circle." Noble Hawk nodded grimly. "Find Spotted Wolf. Tell him to gather the warriors. We must—" A woman's cry cut through the air. Both men turned sharply toward the sound, coming from the direction of the creek's bend, where women gathered water. Noble Hawk's blood ran cold. He recognized Sarah's voice. They ran, weapons ready, rounding the bend to find Sarah backing away from two military scouts. She held her water vessel before her like a shield, her other hand protective over her prominent belly. The scouts looked as surprised as she did, clearly not expecting to find a white woman in a Comanche camp. "Miss," one of the scouts stepped forward, hand extended. "Are you Sarah Mitchell? We've been searching for you." Noble Hawk moved swiftly, placing himself between Sarah and the scouts. Running Deer flanked him, bow drawn. The scouts' hands moved to their rifles. "This woman is under my protection," Noble Hawk stated clearly, his English careful and deliberate. "She stays of her own free will." "Sir, we have orders to bring her back," the first scout said. "Her family's been worried sick. Pastor William himself leads prayers for her return every Sunday." Noble Hawk felt Sarah's hand touch his arm. "They're lying," she said softly. "Pastor William is the one who cast me out. He would never pray for my return." The second scout's face hardened. "Listen, Indian, this doesn't have to get messy. Just hand over the girl and we'll forget we found your camp." "I'm not going anywhere." Sarah's voice rang out stronger now. "This is my home now. These are my people." The words sent a warmth through Noble Hawk's chest even as he assessed their tactical situation. More warriors would be coming soon. They had systems for raising alarm. But until then— "You should leave," he told the scouts. "Now, before—" The crack of a rifle shot split the air. One of the scouts had fired upward, a warning shot that would bring more soldiers. Within moments, the quiet afternoon erupted into chaos. Warriors seemed to materialize from the trees as the alarm spread. The scouts found themselves surrounded, their bravado faltering as they realized their position. Spotted Wolf appeared at Noble Hawk's side, his face grim. "Take them," Noble Hawk ordered, "in Comanche, but keep them alive. We need to know their numbers, their positions." As warriors moved to disarm the scouts, Sarah swayed slightly beside him. Noble Hawk turned quickly, catching her arm. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her face was pale. "The baby. The shock of the gunshot. I felt something." "Morning." Star appeared as if summoned, taking Sarah's other arm. "Come. This is not good for the child." She shot her brother a meaningful look. "Handle this quickly. I may need you." Noble Hawk watched them go, torn between his duties as leader and his heart's desire to follow. The scouts were being bound, their weapons collected. Running Deer approached with their badges and papers found in their saddlebags. "There's a larger patrol," Running Deer reported, "waiting half a day's ride south. These two were just the advance scouts." Noble Hawk studied the military documents, his expression darkening. Maps showed the locations of new forts, the systematic closing of traditional Comanche territories. And there on an official order was Sarah's name, not as a missing woman to be rescued, but as evidence of Indian depredations against white settlements. They meant to use her as an excuse for military action. Her presence in his camp would justify whatever violence they planned to unleash. A messenger came running from the direction of Morning Star's teepee. "The woman, the baby comes early." "Morning. Star calls for you." Noble Hawk thrust the papers into Running Deer's hands. "Take charge here. Learn what you can from them. Spotted Wolf, prepare the camp for movement. We may need to leave quickly." He strode toward Morningstar's teepee, his heart pounding with more than exertion. Inside, he found Sarah lying on a bed of furs, her face contorted in pain. Morningstar knelt beside her, sorting through her medicine bundle with quick, practiced movements. "Brother," Morningstar said without looking up, "hold her hand. The child comes too soon. She needs anchor in this storm." Noble Hawk knelt opposite, his sister taking Sarah's offered hand. She gripped it with surprising strength, her eyes meeting his with a mix of fear and trust that squeezed his heart. "I'm sorry," she gasped between pains. "I never meant to bring such trouble to your people." He smoothed back her sweat-dampened hair, remembering the half-frozen woman he'd found in the snow months ago. "You brought no trouble that was not already coming. The world changes. We change with it." She managed a small smile, then tensed with another contraction. Outside, he could hear the camp preparing for possible battle or flight. Two worlds colliding, with this woman and her child at the center of the storm. Morningstar began to sing softly, a birthing song as old as their people. Noble Hawk joined her, letting the ancient words carry his prayers for protection, for safety, for a future he was only beginning to imagine. The captured scouts' saddlebags yielded more than military orders. As Morningstar tended to Sarah's early labor pains, Running Deer brought Noble Hawk a water-stained envelope addressed to the territorial governor. The letter inside, written in Pastor William's precise hand, made Noble Hawk's jaw clench with barely contained anger. He read it by firelight in Morningstar's teepee, while Sarah dozed fitfully between contractions. The words painted a very different picture of events than what Sarah had told them, and revealed an even uglier truth. "Sarah," he touched her shoulder gently, "there is something you should see." She struggled to sit up, Morningstar supporting her back with rolled furs. Noble Hawk hesitated, then handed her the letter. Her hands trembled as she read, "Your Excellency, I write with grave concerns regarding the Comanche presence in our territory. They have taken one of our young women, Sarah Mitchell, daughter of respected settlers, who was with child by my son James before his untimely death. The girl, distraught with grief, wandered into the wilderness. Now these savages hold her, against her will, using her as a shield against military action. I beseech you to authorize immediate military intervention. My congregation stands ready to testify to the girl's virtue and her tragic connection to my family. Let her rescue be the justification needed to finally drive these heathens from our lands. In Christ's name, Pastor William Blackwood." Sarah's face had gone white as snow. "James," she whispered, "the pastor's son. He left for seminary back east last summer. We never." She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Noble Hawk took the letter from her shaking hands. "Tell me." Through pain-shortened breaths, Sarah's story emerged. "James was kind to me, would talk to me after services. But we were never. The baby's father is Thomas Peterson. But James," she closed her eyes in sudden understanding, "James saw us together that night by the creek. He must have told his father. And Pastor William cast you out to hide his son's knowledge of your shame," Morningstar said softly, her hands steady as she prepared more birthing medicines. "To protect his family's reputation." "No!" Sarah's voice strengthened with anger. "He cast me out because I knew too much. The night before Thomas left, James approached me. He was drunk, angry, said things about his father, about missing church funds, about secrets kept from the congregation. He was supposed to leave for seminary, but he was running away instead." Another contraction gripped her and she grabbed Noble Hawk's hand. "I was going to tell Thomas everything, but he left before I could." Noble Hawk squeezed her hand gently. "And now Pastor William uses you to serve his own purposes. Your death in the snow, or your rescue from us. Either would have suited his needs." "The letter," Running Deer spoke from the teepee's entrance, "is part of a larger packet. Maps of, your camp locations, details about tribal movements. The pastor has been gathering information for months." Sarah's face crumpled. All those prayers, those sermons about virtue and sin. He would have let me die to keep his secrets, would have started a war to hide his shame. Her hand moved protectively over her belly as another contraction came. Morning Star pressed a cup of medicine to her lips. "Drink. The baby responds to your distress. We must calm both mother and child." Noble Hawk stood, decision crystallizing in his mind. "Running Deer, bring White Bear and Spotted Wolf. We must move camp tonight. The pastor's letter proves he has spies watching us. The military will know our location soon, if they don't already." "Tonight?" Morning Star looked up sharply. "Sarah is in labor, which is why we must go now before it progresses too far. Once the baby comes, she cannot travel." He knelt beside Sarah again, his voice softening. "Can you ride? We will make it as comfortable as possible." Sarah met his eyes, and despite her pain, he saw the same strength that had carried her through the winter snow. "I can ride, but Noble Hawk." She gripped his arm. "The letter. Everyone should know the truth about him, your people and mine." He touched her cheek gently, allowing himself this one moment of tenderness. "The truth will be told, but first, we must get you and your child to safety." Within an hour, the camp was breaking down with practiced efficiency. Sarah, wrapped in warm robes, sat before Noble Hawk on his horse. Her labor pains had slowed somewhat with Morning Star's medicines, but they all knew it was temporary. They would need to find a safe place soon. As they rode through the snowy night, Sarah leaned back against Noble Hawk's chest. "I've spent so long being ashamed," she whispered, "believing I deserved judgment, but the real sin was his, using faith as a weapon, twisting truth to serve his own ends." Noble Hawk's arm tightened around her. "Shame is a heavy burden, but you carried it with dignity, made it into strength." He thought of her months in the camp, learning their ways, earning respect. "You turned judgment into wisdom." Morning Star rode beside them, watching Sarah carefully for signs of advancing labor. The rest of the tribe spread out behind them, a long line of people moving through the darkness, carrying their world on horseback as they had done for generations. Above them, stars wheeled in the clear winter sky, the same stars Sarah's beaded, moccasins honored, the same stars that had guided Noble Hawk to her that bitter day in the snow. Different stories, different paths, converging under the same infinite heavens. Sarah's hand found his where it rested on the horse's reins. "When the baby comes," she said softly, "I want it to have your name. Not Peterson, not Mitchell, a new name for a new beginning." The words hung in the cold air between them, heavy with meaning. Before Noble Hawk could respond, Sarah tensed with another contraction. Morning Star moved closer, concern etching her features. They would need to stop soon, but for now they rode on through the night, carrying truth and hope and new life under the watching stars. Dawn found the tribe sheltering in a hidden valley, the horses steaming in the cold morning. As the women set up a temporary camp, Spotted Wolf and Running Deer continued examining the documents taken from the scouts. Among military orders and Pastor William's letter, they discovered something that made even the seasoned warriors fall silent. A treaty document marked with government seals. Noble Hawk studied the papers in the growing light, his expression darkening with each page. Sarah, resting nearby on a bed of quickly gathered furs, watched his face change. Despite Morning Star's medicines, her contractions were growing stronger, more regular. "What is it?" she asked, recognizing the gravity in his bearing. Noble Hawk knelt beside her, the papers heavy in his hands. "A plan, not just for us, but for all the free bands." He spoke quietly, but anger threaded through his words. "They will force every Comanche onto reservations before the spring grass grows. Those who resist will be considered hostile, hunted down." White Bear, who had joined them, spat on the frozen ground. "They make treaties only to break them. Each piece of paper takes more land, more freedom." "The fort they're building to the south," Running Deer added. "It's not just a fort. It's to be the administration center for the reservations. They're creating a cage, and we're already inside it." Sarah struggled to sit up, another contraction building. "But surely there must be a way, some legal means to protect your rights." Rights? White Bear's laugh was bitter. What rights do they give people they see as savages? Even you, a white woman carrying a white man's child, they cast out when it suited them. Noble Hawk held up the treaty document, its official seals blood red in the morning light. This paper promises food, medicine, education, the same promises they've made and broken before. But here, he pointed to a specific paragraph, they reveal their true purpose. Any band that refuses reservation life will be considered at war with the United States. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Spotted Wolf growled. They want us to fight, to give them excuse for what they plan to do anyway. Sarah gasped as a stronger contraction took her, and Morningstar immediately moved to her side. But even through the pain, her mind worked quickly. 5 months among the Comanche had taught her to think differently, to see patterns in seemingly unrelated events. Pastor William's letter, she managed between breaths. It's part of this too, isn't it? My rescue would give them the reason they need to move against you now, before spring. Noble Hawk nodded grimly. Your death in the snow would have served them just as well. Either way, they would paint us as savages who must be controlled. Morningstar looked up from attending Sarah. The child comes soon, brother. We cannot move her again. And we cannot stay here, White Bear argued. This valley will not hide so many people for long. Noble Hawk stood, touching the eagle feather in his hair as he thought. Sarah watched him, seeing the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. These were his people, their lives in his hands, and now she and her unborn child were bound up in their fate. There is another way, she said suddenly, clarity coming despite her pain. If I went to the territorial governor myself, told the truth about Pastor William, about how your people saved me. No, Noble Hawk's voice was firm. They would never let you leave that fort once they had you. But if we could expose his lies, the treaty shows their minds are already made up, White Bear interrupted. They don't need his lies anymore. They have their own. Another contraction took Sarah's words away. When it passed, she found Noble Hawk kneeling beside her. Again, his hand finding hers. You chose us, he said softly. Now we choose our own path together. To the others, he added more strongly, we will not run, and we will not surrender, but neither will we fight as they expect us to. There is another way, if we are brave, enough to take it. In the distance, a wolf howled, a lone voice soon joined by others. The morning wind carried the sound through the valley like a song of defiance, of hope, of possibilities not yet born. Sarah squeezed Noble Hawk's hand as her body prepared to bring new life into this uncertain world. The treaty document lay forgotten in the snow beside them, its red seals like drops of blood on the white ground, a symbol of promises about to be broken and new ones waiting to be made. In the growing heat of Morningstar's hastily erected teepee, Sarah watched through waves of pain as Noble Hawk and his warriors prepared for what might come. Her labor had intensified, but her attention was caught by the careful ritual unfolding before her. The preparation of war paint, each color ground from sacred stones and mixed with bear fat in patterns passed down through generations. Morningstar worked nearby, alternating between checking Sarah's progress and preparing her own medicines. Watch, she instructed Sarah, seeing her interest despite the pain. Even this has meaning for our people. Noble Hawk sat cross-legged as Spotted Wolf ground the pigments, red from sacred clay, black from charcoal, white from river chalk. Each color held power, carried stories older than any of them. The eagle feather in Noble Hawk's hair caught the firelight as he began to speak softly. The red, he explained to Sarah, meeting her eyes across the fire, is for blood, not of enemies, but of our own people. It reminds us what we protect. He drew 2 fingers through the paint, marking his cheeks with parallel lines. The black is for strength, for the dark places we must pass through. More lines, these across his forehead. The white is for the spirit world, watching over us. Sarah gripped the fur beneath her as another contraction built. Not for war then? For protection, Morningstar answered, pressing a cool cloth to Sarah's forehead. The colors shield body and spirit both. Our father taught us this. The paint is not to make us fierce, but to make us strong. Outside, they could hear the camp preparing. White Bear's people and Noble Hawks had merged into one community, working together to fortify their position. The hidden valley offered some protection, but they all knew it was temporary. A young warrior entered, his face anxious. Riders approaching from the south, army scouts. Noble Hawk rose, his paint not yet complete. How many? A small party. 6, maybe 8. They're moving carefully, searching. Sarah tried to sit up, panic mixing with pain. They're following our trail from last night. Peace, Morningstar soothed, gently pressing her back down. The baby comes soon. You must focus on that. But Sarah grabbed Noble Hawk's hand as he passed. Wait, I need to tell you something. In case, he said firmly, crouching beside her. You will live to tell me yourself. She shook her head, tears mixing with sweat. Please, what you said before about choosing our own path. I want you to know Another contraction stole her words. Noble Hawk pressed his forehead to hers, uncaring that his fresh paint marked her skin. I know, he whispered. I have known. Since I found you in the snow. When he pulled back, Sarah wore the marks of his protection. Red lines of blood bonds, black lines of shared struggles, white lines of spiritual connection. Morningstar nodded in approval. Now she carries the medicine too. Running Deer appeared at the teepee's entrance. They're getting closer. We need to move now. Noble Hawk straightened, every inch the leader despite his incomplete paint. Morningstar, the baby? His sister shook her head. Soon, very soon, we cannot move her. Then we make our stand here. He looked down at Sarah, his expression softening. You chose us. Now we choose you. Both of you. To Running Deer, he called out orders. Position warriors in the high rocks. No one fires unless fired upon. White Bear's hunters to the North Pass. Let no one flank us. And send young River to help my sister. A woman's first birth should be attended by one who remembers her own. As the camp erupted into silent, purposeful activity, Sarah watched Noble Hawk complete his paint. Each stroke was a prayer, each a color, a promise. The pain of her labor seemed to flow into the earth beneath her, connecting her to this land that had become her home. Morningstar began to sing softly, a birth song that was also a war song, a prayer for new life in the midst of death's threat. Young River joined her, then other women gathering outside the teepee. Their voices rose like smoke into the winter sky, carrying both defiance and hope. Sarah felt the paint on her forehead, Noble Hawk's mark of protection, of belonging. Whatever came next, she was no longer an outcast. She was chosen, marked, part of something larger than herself. As another contraction built, she joined her voice to the women's song, letting its power carry her toward whatever fate awaited them all in. The tense hours that followed, Noble Hawk made one last attempt at peace. He stood at the valley's edge, holding high a white flag, a traded bedsheet that had once belonged to Sarah. Below, the military scouts had positioned themselves in a defensive formation, rifles ready but not yet raised. From her place in mourning, Star's teepee, Sarah could hear the exchange through the thin walls, her labor momentarily steady enough to focus on the words being spoken. We know you have the Mitchell woman, a voice called up. Young, perhaps not much older than Running Deer. Her family wants her back safe. Noble Hawk's response carried clearly. The woman you seek is here by choice. She knows the truth about Pastor Williams' lies. We have orders, signed by the territorial governor himself. Come down, let's discuss this reasonably. A bitter wind swept through the valley, carrying snow flurries that danced between the two groups like restless spirits. Sarah gripped young River's hand as another contraction began building. Tell your governor, Noble Hawk replied, that we have seen his treaty. We know what reasonable discussion means to your people. Silence followed, broken only by the creak of leather and the stamping of nervous horses. Then, you have 1 hour to surrender the woman and agree to peaceful relocation. After that, We cannot guarantee your people's safety." The white flag dipped slowly as Noble Hawk turned away from the valley's edge. Within moments, he entered the teepee, his war paint stark against his grim expression. "They bring more than words," he reported to the small group gathered inside. "Signal fires to the south. A larger force approaches." Sarah struggled to sit up, Morning Star supporting her back. "How many?" "Too many." White Bear's voice was dark with certainty. "They mean to make an example of us." Noble Hawk knelt beside Sarah, his hand finding hers. The paint marks he had given her earlier were smudged with sweat, but still visible, a sign of her belonging, her choice to stand with them. "The baby comes soon," Morning Star announced, her hands working steadily to prepare more medicines. Perhaps if they saw the birth, understood that new life comes from our two peoples joining." "They don't want understanding," Sarah gasped through another wave of pain. "Pastor William has poisoned their minds against anything that challenges his authority." She clutched Noble Hawk's hand harder. "But there might be another way." All eyes turned to her. Even through her labor pains, Sarah's mind worked quickly. 5 months among the Comanche had taught her to think differently, to see patterns and possibilities where others saw only walls. "The scouts you captured," she continued, "they've seen how I live here. Let them return to their commanders. Let them tell what they've seen. Not a captive, but a woman who chose this life, who found kindness instead of judgment, acceptance instead of condemnation." Noble Hawk's eyes met his sister's over Sarah's head. Something passed between them, a shared memory, perhaps, of their father's teachings about finding strength in unexpected places. "And if they twist your words," White Bear challenged, "make you seem bewitched or simple-minded, then we show them something they cannot twist." Sarah's voice strengthened with conviction despite her pain. "We show them what true Christian charity looks like, by offering peace even in the face of their threats." Young River, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "The old stories tell of times when our people adopted whites who came to us willingly. Some became great leaders, bridges between worlds. Those days are past," White Bear argued, but there was less certainty in his tone. Noble Hawk stood, decision crystallizing in his bearing. "Perhaps, or perhaps they only sleep, waiting to be awakened." He touched the eagle feather in his hair, then looked to Spotted Wolf. "Bring the scouts, unbound but watched. Let them see what is real, not what Pastor William tells them is real." As warriors moved to comply, Sarah cried out, a different kind of pain this time. Morning Star's hands moved quickly, checking her progress. "The child comes," she announced, "all men out, except my brother." In the controlled chaos that followed, Sarah was aware of movement around the camp, warriors taking positions, women gathering children into protected spaces, scouts being brought to witness something they had not expected to see. Above it all, she heard Noble Hawk's voice giving final instructions. "If they attack, protect the women and children first, but do not fire unless fired upon. Let them see we are not what they fear us to be." He returned to her side as another contraction gripped her, his painted face both fierce and gentle in the tipee's firelight. Outside, the hour of ultimatum crept closer, while within, new life prepared to enter a world balanced between war and peace. Sarah looked up into Noble Hawk's eyes, seeing in them the same vision that had brought her through the winter snow, a dream of two worlds meeting, not in conflict but in creation. Then the next pain took her, and there was no more time for dreams or fears or plans. The time for new life and perhaps new hope had come. Sarah's world had narrowed to pain and purpose when the first shots rang out. Through the haze of labor, she was aware of Morning Star working swiftly to create a special blanket, half-settler quilt, half-Comanche design, to receive the coming child. The fabric pieces had been gathered from both her old life and her new one, sewn together with prayers in 2 languages. "The child chooses a difficult time to enter this world," Morning Star murmured, positioning the blanket nearby as another. Contraction seized Sarah's body. Outside, they could hear the chaos erupting. The hour's deadline had passed, and someone, it wasn't clear which side, had fired first. Noble Hawk stood at the tipee's entrance, torn between his roles as leader. and protect her. Go, Sarah managed between pains. Your people need you. But before he could move, Running Deer burst in. Soldiers approaching from the North Pass, and he hesitated. Pastor William rides with them. Sarah's next contraction mixed with a bitter laugh. Of course he does. He comes to witness his handiwork. Noble Hawk's face hardened beneath its war paint. What of the scouts we released? Did they deliver our message? They tried, Running Deer reported. I heard them telling their commander about Sarah, about the true story. But the pastor, he spat the word like a curse. He called them bewitched, said the savages had corrupted their minds. More shots rang out, closer now. Morning Star worked faster, her hands sure despite the tension. The blanket took shape, a symbol of two worlds meeting in the new life about to enter them. Brother, she said sharply, the child comes soon. Whatever you plan, it must be now. Noble Hawk knelt quickly beside Sarah, his painted face fierce with emotion. Trust me, he whispered, touching her cheek with a gentle hand that belied his warrior's appearance. Sarah gripped his arm through another pain. Always, she gasped. Then with sudden clarity, let me see him. What? Pastor William. Let me face him. Let everyone see the truth. Morning Star protested. The child will come when it comes, Sarah said with steel in her voice. But first, let me finish what began that day in the snow. Noble Hawk studied her face, seeing in it the same strength that had carried her through winter storms and cultural barriers. He nodded once, sharply. What followed seemed to Sarah both instantaneous and eternal. Supported between Noble Hawk and Morning Star, wrapped in furs and trying to breathe through her labor, she emerged from the teepee into the winter morning light. Around them, warriors held defensive positions, while women and children huddled in protected spaces. Below, the military force had grown, at least 30 mounted soldiers now, and there, his black coat stark against the snow, sat Pastor William atop his horse. Even at this distance, Sarah could see his face change when he recognized her. Sarah. Mitchell, his voice carried up the slope, heavy with false concern. Thank God we've found you at last. Your family has been sick with worry. Sarah straightened as much as her condition allowed. The paint marks on her face felt like fire in the cold air, marks of belonging, of choice, of truth. My family. Her voice rang out strong and clear. You cast me out to die. You knew what your son James told me about the missing church funds, about your lies. A murmur went through the soldiers. Pastor William's face darkened. The girl is confused, clearly. Influenced by her captors, I was never captured. The next contraction nearly drove her to her knees, but Noble Hawk's strength kept her upright. These people saved me when you condemned me. They offered shelter when you offered only judgment. Another pain stole her breath. Morning Star steadied her other side, whispering, the child comes now, ready or not. But Sarah wasn't finished. Drawing on depths of strength she didn't know she had, she addressed the soldiers directly. Look at me. Look at how I'm held, not as a captive, but as family. Your scouts told you the truth. I choose to be here. I choose these people. I choose... Her words ended in a cry as the most powerful contraction yet took hold. Noble Hawk's voice took over, carrying to every ear in the valley. This woman carries new life, a child of both our peoples. Will you make its first breath be filled with gun smoke? Will you stain its welcome with blood? The valley held its breath. In that suspended moment, Sarah looked down at Pastor William and saw something crack in his righteous facade. She saw, the moment he realized his lies were unraveling, that truth could be stronger than carefully constructed deceptions. Then there was no more time for words or confrontations. The child within her demanded entry into the world, and Sarah surrendered to the ancient rhythm of birth. As Morning Star and Noble Hawk hurried her back into the teepee, she heard Running Deer call out, riders approaching from the east. More riders. The blanket waited, two worlds sewn together, ready to receive whatever future was about to be born. Inside, Morning Star's teepee. As Sarah fought through the final stages of labor, a remarkable scene unfolded outside. The riders from the east were not more soldiers, but representatives from other Comanche bands, led by a legendary peace chief known as Wise Eagle. With them rode something even more unexpected, 2 Indian agents who had worked for years to build trust between the peoples and Sarah's own parents. Noble Hawk stood at the teepee's entrance, watching as Wise Eagle dismounted before the military line. The old chief carried a peace pipe, one that had been used in treaties for generations, its carved bowl marked with symbols of both native and settler peacemaking traditions. Sarah's cry of pain pierced the tense air. Her mother, Elizabeth Mitchell, tried to rush forward but was held back by soldiers. "Let her pass," Wise Eagle's voice carried across the valley. "Or do you make war on grandmothers now?" The commanding officer, a Colonel Matthews by his insignia, looked uncertainly between the peace chief and Pastor William. The pastor's face had grown pale, seeing his carefully constructed narrative crumbling. "This is irregular," the colonel said. "We have orders, based on lies." Elizabeth Mitchell's voice rang out. "That man," she pointed at Pastor William, "drove my daughter out to die rather than face his own shame. Ask him about his son James. Ask him about the missing church funds." Inside the teepee, Sarah gripped Morningstar's hand as the final stage of labor began. "My mother," she gasped. "I hear." "My mother." "Focus," Morningstar instructed, positioning the special blanket. "Your child comes now. The rest will wait." Noble Hawk spoke quietly to Running Deer, who quickly carried messages to the warriors holding defensive positions. Then he knelt beside Sarah, his war paint now streaked with sweat and worry. "Your parents reached the eastern bands," he explained quickly between her pains. "They've been searching for you, fighting Pastor William's lies. Wise Eagle brings a chance for peace. Real peace, not surrender." Sarah's answer was a cry of effort as her body worked to bring new life into the world. Outside, they could hear multiple voices now. The colonel questioning Pastor William, Elizabeth Mitchell's clear tones telling her story, Wise Eagle's measured words about paths forward. The peace pipe passed from hand to hand, first among the Comanche leaders, then to the Indian agents, finally to Colonel Matthews himself. Only Pastor William refused it when it came to him, his hands shaking as he backed his horse away from the gathering. "You'll all regret this," he blustered. "These savages, these people," Colonel Matthews cut him off, "have shown more Christian charity than you, Pastor. They took in a woman you condemned. They offered shelter when you gave judgment." His voice hardened. "And now I want to hear more about these missing church funds." Sarah's final push coincided with Pastor William's attempt to flee. As her child's first cry rang out across the valley, the pastor's horse reared, throwing him into the snow. The military scouts he had so recently condemned as bewitched were the ones who took him into custody. "A girl," Morningstar announced, wrapping the infant in the special blanket. Settler cloth and Comanche design united around new life. Strong and perfect. Elizabeth Mitchell burst into the teepee, falling to her knees beside her daughter. "Sarah, oh, my Sarah." But Sarah's eyes were on Noble Hawk as he took in the sight of her daughter, the first child born to their joined peoples, wrapped in a blanket that symbolized her dual heritage. Without words, he knelt beside them, touching the infant's cheek with a finger still marked with warrior's paint. "She bridges our worlds," he said softly. Outside, negotiations continued. Wise Eagle's peace pipe passed from hand to hand as terms were discussed. Not surrender, but true compromise. The treaty document that had threatened forced relocation was burned in the council fire, replaced by new agreements written with understanding rather than fear. Sarah held her daughter close, supported by her mother's arms and Noble Hawk's strength. Morning Star began a soft birthing song, one that spoke of new beginnings and ancient continuations. One by one, other voices joined, Comanche women and Sarah's mother together, weaving harmony from different traditions. The infant opened her eyes, dark and wise as the prairie sky. Sarah touched the blanket that held her, past and future sewn together with love and hope. "Her name," she said clearly, "will be Dawn." Noble Hawk smiled, understanding. Dawn, the time between night and day, when all things are possible, when worlds can meet and make something new. Outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds, lighting the valley where two peoples had found a way forward together. The peace pipe completed its circle, and with it a new kind of peace began. Spring brought green shoots pushing through melting snow, and new arrangements being born from winter's trials. The day of Noble Hawk and Sarah's wedding dawned clear and bright, with both Comanche traditions and settler customs woven together as carefully as the patterns in their ceremonial clothes. Sarah stood in Morning Star's teepee, wearing a dress that told the story of their journey. The base was simple settler cotton, but it had been beautifully adorned with Comanche beadwork and quill work. Morning Star and Elizabeth Mitchell had worked together on it, each woman contributing her traditions, their fingers sharing the same threads as they shared stories and hopes for the future. "There was a time," Elizabeth said softly, adjusting the dress's shoulders, "when I thought I'd lost you forever. Now, I see you found your way to something greater than any of us could have imagined." Baby Dawn slept peacefully in her cradle, board nearby, decorated with symbols from both cultures. She had her father's dark eyes and her mother's auburn hair, a living bridge between worlds, just as the peace pipe had promised. Outside, two communities gathered together. Colonel Matthews had kept his word, establishing new agreements that respected the Comanche's right to maintain their traditional ways while building peaceful relations with settling families. Pastor William's replacement, a younger man with a more generous spirit, stood ready to offer Christian blessings alongside the Comanche medicine man's prayers. Noble Hawk waited for his bride, dressed in traditional Comanche ceremonial garments, but with one significant addition: a silver cross hung beside his eagle feather, a gift from Sarah's grandmother that symbolized the joining of their spiritual paths. As Sarah stepped out of the teepee, the morning sun caught the beadwork on her dress, sending rainbow light dancing across the gathering. The assembled people, Comanche and settler alike, drew in a collective breath at the sight of her. Here was living proof that beauty could arise from the darkest storms, that love could bridge the widest chasms. "Two paths join today," Wise Eagle announced, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Not to erase each other, but to create something new, something stronger." The ceremony that followed honored both people's ways. Prayers were offered in two languages, sacred smoke carried blessings from both traditions, and promises were made that bound not just two hearts, but two communities in understanding. When Noble Hawk and Sarah were pronounced husband and wife, the cheers that rose came from all throats together, a sound of hope, of possibility, of future. 1 year later, a traveling photographer set up his equipment at the trading post that had grown between the Comanche camp and the settler community. The resulting family portrait captured a moment of profound transformation. Noble Hawk, standing proud in his traditional dress, with the eagle feather and silver cross catching the light. Sarah beside him in a blend of settler and Comanche clothing. And little Dawn, now walking, wearing moccasins beaded by her grandmother Elizabeth, while holding a wooden horse carved by her father. Morning Star stood with them, her medicine bundle open to share healing knowledge with settler women, who now came to learn the old ways. In the background, new lodges stood beside wooden cabins, two peoples learning to live together, each enriched by the other's wisdom. The photograph, remarkable for its time, showed not conquest or submission, but a new kind of community being born on the frontier. Most striking were the smiles, real, unforced expressions of joy that the photographer captured despite the long exposure time. Here was the truth that Pastor William had feared, love and understanding, proving stronger than prejudice and fear. On warm summer evenings, when the community gathers to share stories, an ancient drum speaks of love that transcended boundaries. The drum, its hide painted with symbols from both cultures, passes from hand to hand. As each generation adds its voice to the tale, they tell of a woman cast out in winter's fury, of a leader who chose compassion over fear, of a child born in the space between worlds. The drum's rhythms carry memories of that time, of war paint used for protection rather than battle, of a peace pipe that built bridges instead of surrender, of a baby's first cry drowning out the sounds of conflict. Young Dawn, now grown with children of her own, sometimes holds the drum and adds her own heartbeat to its song, remembering how her first blanket wove two worlds together. Years later, visitors to the thriving community often notice a unique medallion displayed in the meeting lodge, where both peoples gather. One side bears the image of an eagle feather and a cross intertwined. The other shows a woman in the snow reaching toward a warrior's outstretched hand. Crafted by artisans from both cultures, the medallion speaks of choices made in winter storms, of faith found in unexpected places, of love that builds bridges across the deepest divides. When children ask about the medallion's meaning, they learn that the bravest journeys are those that lead us past our fears, that the strongest bonds are forged in the coldest nights, and that sometimes being cast out is just another word for being set free.